Elias woke slowly, the way someone rises out of a deep, heavy dream that refuses to let go. His eyes blinked against soft morning light coming from curtains he did not recognize. He felt warm, wrapped in a blanket that definitely was not his, and when the scent of lavender reached him, he knew something was wrong. This was not his room. This was not his bed. He sat up too fast, forcing a dull ache through the back of his head. The blanket slipped off his shoulders, and a wave of confusion washed over him. He touched his temple, trying to understand how he could have ended up here. He remembered going to sleep in his own apartment, in his own bed, after another long night of restless thoughts and strange dreams. But this was someone else's space. The walls were painted soft blue. A small shelf held neat rows of books. A framed picture of a cat sat on the bedside table. It was quiet in the room, peaceful in a way that his usually cluttered apartment never was. Before he could gather his thoughts, a gentle voice came from the open doorway. "Elias? You're awake." He turned sharply. Standing there with a small cup in her hand was Mira, his neighbor from the apartment across the hall. She was wearing comfortable house clothes and a warm, concerned expression. She looked exactly as she always did, calm, careful, and kind. But the situation was anything except normal. Elias tried to speak, but all that came out was a confused breath. Mira stepped into the room and placed the cup tea, from the smell of it on the table. "You cried in your sleep," she said softly, "but you're safe here." Elias stared at her, unable to understand the meaning behind her words. Safe? Why wouldn't he be safe? Why would he be crying? Round. He tried to remember the night before, but everything after shutting off his lights felt like a blurred fog. "Mira," he said finally, his voice rough. What happened? Why am I here?" She sat on a chair near the bed, folding her hands in her lap. She took a slow breath, as if choosing each word with care. "You came to my door late last night," she said. "You were disoriented. You looked exhausted. You said you didn't feel well, and that something was wrong." His heart thudded. He had no memory of this. "I opened the door, and you almost collapsed," she continued. "I helped you sit down, but you were shaking. You could barely speak. So, I let you rest here." Her tone was calm, but he could hear the worry beneath it. Mira was the kind of neighbor everyone wished they had: quiet, helpful, and respectful. She would never exaggerate, never invent a story. If she said he came to her door, then he had. But the question was, why? "Did I say anything? Anything that made sense?" Elias asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Mira hesitated. That hesitation made him tense. "You kept saying you needed help," she said. "That something was following you. That you couldn't stay in your apartment." Elias stiffened. That didn't sound like him. He wasn't the type to panic. He wasn't the type to run to someone else for help. He lived alone, handled his own problems, and rarely talked about what troubled him. And the idea of saying something was following him, it felt unreal, strange. Like a sentence pulled from some half-forgotten nightmare, instead of reality. "Following me?" he repeated quietly. She nodded. "But you were half asleep." Elias. Maybe it was just a dream. He wanted to believe that. A dream would explain everything: crying in his sleep, wandering out of his apartment without remembering, knocking on Mira's door in the middle of the night. He had been tired lately. Work had been stressful. And he had been having those strange dreams for weeks now. Dreams filled with shadows, echoes, and whispers he could not quite understand. Maybe last night was simply the breaking point. But something still felt wrong. He rubbed his forehead. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Elias," Mira interrupted, her voice gentle. "You don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. You were scared. Anyone would have helped." Her calmness made it easier to breathe. For a moment, he let himself relax, leaning back against the pillow. The room was quiet again, except for the faint ticking of a small clock on the shelf. "Drink the tea," she said. "It'll help. I made it to calm your nerves." He picked up the cup. It was warm. The steam carried a soothing herbal scent. He took a sip and felt a rush of warmth move through his chest. Mira watched him with the same steady concern. "I didn't want to leave you alone in that state," she added. "I hope you don't mind." "I don't," Elias said. "Thank you. I mean it." She gave a small nod, almost relieved. But even with her comforting presence, his mind kept returning to the dream, or whatever it was that had shaken him so badly he ended up here. He remembered flashes, a dark corridor, a distant humming sound, a presence he couldn't see but felt behind him, a voice that tried to speak, but the words dissolved before he could understand them. The more he tried to recall, the stronger the ache in his head grew. Mira noticed his expression tighten. "Is the pain bad?" "A bit," he admitted. "I can get some medicine." "No, it's fine. Just trying to remember." She hesitated, then said, "Don't force yourself. Memories come back when they're ready." Elias wasn't sure if he believed that. But pushing harder didn't help either. He finished the tea slowly, letting the warmth settle him. Mira glanced at him every few moments, as if making sure he really was all right. He appreciated her presence more than he expected. After a few minutes, she stood. "If you feel strong enough, you can come to the living room. I made breakfast." Elias blinked. "You cooked for me?" "You needed it." She smiled lightly, then added, "And I didn't want you wandering back to your apartment until you were fully awake." He managed a small smile. "Thanks." She stepped out of the room, leaving the door open so he could follow when he was ready. Elias slowly pushed the blanket aside and swung his legs over the edge of the bed. His feet touched the soft carpet. He stood carefully, expecting dizziness, but he felt steady enough. As he walked toward the door, he noticed something strange. On the bedside table, next to the framed cat photo, was his watch. He must have taken it off during the night, or Mira had. But beside it was something that made him pause. A small scrap of paper. It wasn't Mira's handwriting. It wasn't his. It had only 2 words written on it, in sharp, hurried strokes. "Don't trust." The rest of the message was torn. A chill crawled up his back. He picked it up slowly, staring at it, trying to understand. The handwriting looked shaky, desperate. But he had no memory of writing anything. Was it from last night? Was it something he brought with him? Or did Mira find it on him? Before he could think further, Mira called from the other room. "Elias? Are you okay?" He slipped the torn note into his pocket. "I'm coming," he replied. He stepped into the hallway. But as he walked toward the kitchen, one thought followed him like a shadow. If I wrote that note, who was I warning myself about? And why couldn't he remember? The morning sun streamed gently through the half-open curtains, painting soft lines of gold across the room. Liam stirred, blinking against the brightness. He didn't immediately remember where he was. Then, slowly, memories from the night before trickled back, memories of fear, confusion, and the overwhelming sense of loss that had gripped him after the accident. He sat up cautiously, his heart still racing, and glanced around. The room was cozy, warm, and lived in. Books were stacked neatly on a small shelf, a few framed photographs adorned the walls, and a soft rug covered the wooden floor. Everything felt safe, familiar, but at the same time, strange. That was when she appeared. Marissa. She moved quietly across the room, barefoot, carrying a steaming mug of tea. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, catching the sunlight. Her eyes, calm and kind, met his. "You're awake," she said softly, setting the mug on the bedside table. I, uh, yeah, Liam stammered, feeling suddenly awkward. Thanks. For last night. Marissa smiled gently, taking a seat in the armchair by the window. You needed rest. You were crying in your sleep. But you're safe here. You're okay now. Liam swallowed hard. The memory of his nightmare still lingered. The accident, the crash, the scream. For a moment, he felt like a child again, small and helpless. I don't even remember falling asleep, he admitted, staring at his hands. That's normal, Marissa replied. Sometimes our minds need to escape the pain. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Liam nodded slowly, feeling an odd sense of relief. There was something about her presence, steady, calm, grounding, that made him believe he could get through the fear that had haunted him for so long. Marissa sipped her tea, then looked at him with curiosity. Do you want to talk about it? He hesitated. Words seemed inadequate to describe the whirlwind of emotions inside him. But somehow, with her there, he felt like he could. I don't even know where to start, he said quietly. Everything feels broken. My life, my friends, everything. Marissa reached out, resting a hand lightly on his arm. Start anywhere. I'm listening. And so he did. Words spilled from him like water breaking through a dam. He spoke of the accident, the panic, the endless nights of sleep filled with nightmares. He spoke of his guilt, his helplessness, and the fear that he might never feel normal again. Marissa didn't interrupt, she just listened. And that, Liam realized slowly, was what made him feel safe, simply being heard without judgment. When he finally fell silent, exhausted from the torrent of emotions, Marissa gave a small, understanding smile. Thank you for trusting me, she said softly. You make it seem less scary, Liam admitted. That's because it is less scary, she replied simply. You survived. You're here, and I'll help you take the next step. If you like, I can continue the next 700-800 words to complete part 2 inches the same style. Keeping it engaging. The day passed quietly, but not uneventfully. Liam found himself observing Marissa as she moved about her apartment, noticing the little things. The way she hummed softly while preparing lunch, the careful arrangement of herbs on her windowsill, and the gentle way she spoke to the cat curled up in the sunlight. There was a calmness about her that made the apartment feel like a safe harbor in a world Liam had begun to see as unpredictable and harsh. Do you want to go outside? Marissa asked after a while, breaking his thoughts. Liam blinked, a little surprised. He hadn't realized how long he'd been sitting quietly, lost in his mind. Outside? He echoed. The park, she said with a small smile. Fresh air might do you some good. He hesitated. He had never been good at social interactions, especially after the accident. But something about Marissa's presence encouraged him to take small steps forward. Okay, he said finally. The walk was slow, measured. Liam noticed how his steps felt tentative at first, unsure of the world outside the apartment walls. The sun was warm, and the air smelled faintly of flowers and fresh grass. Children played at a distance, their laughter echoing across the park, and dogs chased each other with uncontained joy. For the first time in weeks, Liam felt a small spark of curiosity rather than fear. You're quiet, Marissa observed as they walked along the path. I'm thinking, he said, glancing around. It's weird. Everything seems alive out here. I haven't really noticed before. Marissa nodded. Sometimes it takes a shock to make us notice the little things. Life, it doesn't always wait for us to be ready. He smiled faintly at that. It was strange, how her words could feel both ordinary and profound at the same time. He wondered how she seemed so certain, so grounded, when he still felt unsteady. They found a quiet bench under a large oak tree, and Marissa gestured for him to sit. Liam did, feeling the solid wood beneath him, the rough bark of the tree offering an unspoken reassurance. "You know," she said after a pause, "life doesn't always give second chances. But sometimes it does. And you got yours. It's not just about surviving, it's about choosing to live fully." Liam thought about that. He had survived the accident, yes, but he hadn't yet chosen to live again. The fear of returning to normal life, of facing friends, family, responsibilities, it all felt heavy and suffocating. Choosing to live, he repeated softly. It sounds simple, but it feels impossible. Marissa reached over, lightly touching his shoulder. "Nothing worthwhile comes easy, but you don't have to do it alone." For a moment, Liam just sat there, letting her words sink in. The fear, the guilt, the panic, they were still there, lurking in the corners of his mind. But for the first time, he felt a small warmth, a tiny thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could untangle himself from it all. The morning was quiet, almost unusually calm. Liam woke up with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. The sunlight spilled across the room, warming the sheets and brushing softly over Marissa's sleeping form in the chair beside him. Last night's conversation replayed in his mind, her words about choosing to live, about taking small steps, and about not facing life alone. Somehow, they had anchored him in a way he hadn't expected. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb her, and walked to the small balcony. Outside, the city was waking up. People moved with purpose, cars hummed along the streets, and birds flitted from tree to tree. The rhythm of the city, once overwhelming, now seemed almost comforting. Liam took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and a thought crossed his mind. Maybe he could step forward. When Marissa awoke, she smiled at him, sensing the change in his demeanor. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Liam replied, returning the smile. There was a new energy in his voice, a small but noticeable confidence that had been missing before. They had breakfast together, talking about simple things, the weather, the books on her shelf, and the small cafe down the street that served the best coffee in the neighborhood. It felt ordinary, yet it was extraordinary for Liam. Ordinary moments had always seemed unattainable, filled with anxiety and fear. Now, he could enjoy them, even if just a little. After breakfast, Marissa suggested a walk through the city. "Let's explore," she said. "Not far, just around the block. You'll see. Little victories matter." Liam nodded. The words felt like a challenge, but not a threatening one. It was an invitation. He followed her down the stairs, out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on his skin. The city was bustling, but it no longer seemed intimidating. He noticed details he had missed before: the bright colors of a bakery sign, the laughter of a street musician, the way the wind caught the leaves on the trees lining the avenue. Every small observation felt like a victory, a reminder that life had depth beyond fear and worry. Marissa walked beside him, chatting casually, guiding him gently. She never pushed him, never demanded more than he could give. Her presence was steady, like a lighthouse in the fog, and Liam realized that perhaps he didn't need to rush. Healing wasn't about speed, it was about persistence. They stopped at a small park, and Liam sat on a bench, watching children play. He felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and curiosity. The world had seemed so hostile after his accident, but now it felt inviting. Marissa sat next to him, her eyes soft and kind. "Do you feel different?" she asked. "I think so," he admitted. "I'm scared, yes, but it's not all fear anymore." "That's progress," she said. Every small step counts. They walked slowly back toward her apartment, stopping occasionally to admire a flower shop or peek into a bookstore. Liam noticed how his heart felt lighter with every step, how his mind no longer spiraled into panic at the sight of crowds or noise. By the time they returned, Liam felt exhausted in the best possible way, tired, yes, but fulfilled. Marissa noticed the difference too. "You've done well today," she said, smiling. He chuckled softly, a sound he hadn't heard from himself in weeks. "It doesn't feel like much, but I feel alive." Marissa reached out and lightly touched his hand. "That's everything," she said. "Life is about being alive, fully present, not just surviving." As evening approached, they sat together on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The city lights began to twinkle, and Liam felt a sense of peace he hadn't known for a long time. "Do you think I can really go back to my old life?" he asked quietly. Marissa looked at him, thoughtful. "Your old life is behind you, but your new life, that's waiting. And I believe you can face it. You've survived the hardest part already. Now it's time to live." Liam nodded. The words felt heavy, but not burdensome. They carried promise. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting pain. It was about learning to move forward despite it. The night settled around them, calm and soft. Liam felt a quiet determination growing within him, a sense that he could face challenges with courage. He wasn't fully healed yet, but he was on his way. And for the first time in months, he felt like the world wasn't something to fear. It was something to explore, to enjoy, to live in. Marissa's hand remained gently on his, a quiet reminder that he was not alone. And in that simple gesture, Liam found hope. For the first time, he believed in second chances, not just surviving them, but embracing them. The future felt uncertain, yes, but it also felt full of possibilities. And Liam knew, deep down, that he was ready to take the next step.